It's time again, as promised. No more boring Tuesdays. Welcome to Heart and Mind. I am Dr. Dina McMillan, and as always, we are covering topics that other people don't. Things that you're here because you want to know. You want to know how society is deceiving us, manipulating us, and what you can do to protect yourself. So today we're talking about something that's very important, the crisis in mental health. And I have Dr. Andrew Hartz with me today from the Open Therapy Institute, and he's going to explain why what he does is so crucial and why you need to know about it. So welcome aboard. And as you know, we're here every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. on the Pacific Coast, where I am from, California. And I have to say, some of the people I work with in the UK want to come on the show, but they're trying to decide if they will be able to stay awake at 1 o'clock in the morning when it airs there. As you know, I have a large number of people from Australia and New Zealand, where it is Wednesday and it's between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. on Wednesday in Australia and New Zealand. And a lot of them join us as well. So thank you for being here. And remember, you can not only watch us live stream, if you are watching this live, sign in on X, on Daily Cloud, on Rumble, and you can actually ask questions, make comments. When Dr. Hartz gets here, I'm sure you will have some great questions for him or some comments. Take advantage of the fact that this is live and get your questions answered right away. Now, if you're watching the recording, we do upload the recording the following day. I usually try to upload the episodes right away on X, but they are also uploaded on Daily Cloud and on Rumble. So you can watch past episodes. If something was interesting, you want to show someone else, go ahead and do that. Now, what is so important about me doing this show? As far as I know, I'm the only social psychologist doing something like this. I belong to the evil science. Now, it's great that we study the brain and learning, but we also look at influence, persuasion, manipulation, coercion, indoctrination, and brainwashing, and we don't just look at it. We actually do experiments to see how easily people can have their beliefs and behaviors altered by an outside force, and we usually try to do it so that they don't realize that they've been manipulated. So insert evil lab here, but I'm working on the side of the angels, so you can actually spot the strings of manipulation and keep yourself from being taken advantage of. Now, speaking of being on the side of the angels, please get your copy of the Pfizer papers. Huge amounts of work went into producing this. It also supports Daily Clout's historic work, bringing this knowledge to the public. It has the latest analysis of the Pfizer clinical trial documents that they went to court to try to hide these documents for 75 years. They were not able to do it. And Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, and others put together this phenomenal book. And you can get your own copy if you go to Amazon. Just go to Amazon and buy your copy. Now, today, what are we talking about today? We're talking about unraveling the mental health crisis. For the last several weeks, we've been talking about what's going on in the brains and the hearts of the woke. It's been really disconcerting / scary, okay? Admittedly, it is very disturbing. And in fact, so disturbing that after talking to a few people, including Melinda Richards, who often joins me on the show from Australia, I'm actually going to turn what I found into an ebook. Ebooks have graphics, they're easily read. I'm going to turn it into an ebook because people need to know what's going on with the woke. It is really frightening. And Dr. Andrew Hartz looked at what was happening and decided we need to do something about it. See, I like the task-oriented people. I don't want people that just complain. He didn't just complain. He opened the Open Therapy Institute, and he's going to talk to you about what's going on in our society and why something like the Open Therapy Institute is so important. So I hope you'll stay with us. He'll be with us in just a moment. Let's be real. Losing weight isn't just about looking good. It's about taking back control of your overall health. 42% of adults in America are classified as obese. Obesity is directly linked to severe health issues, including heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and cancer. These illnesses are costing Americans over $173 billion each year in medical expenses alone. If you've tried diets and different workouts with no success, it's not your fault. Big food and big pharma have rigged the system against you by contradicting information, leaving you confused. But there's good news. The wellness company just launched Drop, a GLP-1 peptide oral drop formula developed by their chief medical board, specifically designed to support your metabolism, curb cravings, and help you shed weight. That's right, no injections or the risk of severe side effects as we're seeing in the Ozempic. Simply take drop in water, gradually increasing quantity over time, and let your body do the rest. Start your weight loss journey today and get $50 off plus free shipping. Head to dailyclouthealth.com and use the code DailyClout. Take action today for a healthier tomorrow. Now, it's interesting because I had asked Dr. Hartz to be here. His name is Andrew. Lovely man. I had asked him a while ago because I'm so impressed with what he's been doing. I also saw him on an episode of Dr. Phil, and he was really good. And then I just happened a few days ago to see this. It was on X. Somebody posted, my therapist went off track and spent 10 minutes telling me about how what Trump is doing to the US is just large-scale psychological abuse. And I don't have a single criticism of her argument. Since when do therapists spend your time, instead of talking about your issues, ranting with incorrect information about the political situation? This is what a lot of us are dealing with right now. And I wanted to tell you something else. This book, Cynical Therapies, is a fantastic book. It has, I was one of the authors that wrote a chapter in this book. And it's interesting for two reasons. Number one, the editor, Val Thomas, is a therapist, clinical therapist in the UK. She gathered people in the UK and the US, therapists who were having so much problem because of activism that they were expected to be left-wing social activists instead of therapists. The focus went from, am I assisting you with your problem, to you have to think a certain way politically, or I can't help you, I won't help you. Your problem is that you don't think that way. And when I was originally approached, they had a publisher in the US who dropped out. And then another one dropped out because they were so afraid to go against the woke. Then we have Amy Gallagher, she actually has approached me. I've told you about my Healing the Rift anti-bias program. She actually approached me about this anti-bias program. She became well known in the UK because she was actually thrown out of her program for therapeutic nursing because the program demanded that every white person admit, and I say that admit, that they are racist. And she said, I'm not a racist. They did not allow that and actually threw her out of the program. So she's, excuse me, suing the National Institute of Health. Now, I know you have some stories to sign in, and in a few minutes, we're going to talk to Dr. Hartz and see about this. It's not just one place. The woke have taken over so many of our institutions, including mental health institutions, and we need to talk about what they're really doing to people. You've heard me rave about how much this product has helped me. What about you? Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and type 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. It's found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, including me, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipe, or ingredients. And you'll speak to a real person who's there and ready to help. Join their private Facebook community to share success stories, recipes, and support each other on this journey called life. Visit getnativepath.com/Daily Clout and start your transformation today. That's GETNATIVE.com/DAILYCLOUT. Well, while looking up things and getting my usual slides, those of you who've been here before, you know that the reason I have slides is not because I'm trying to bore you with the presentation, but because studies have found that we have a visual superiority effect, whether we know it or not. If we hear about information and we see a relevant image, we are significantly more likely to remember that information. I don't want this show to just be interesting. I want you to remember it so you can use it. Now, I also saw this, so you can screenshot this and make it a bit larger. It's a little small. While mental health issues are common, if you look at the difference, see the large red area? Yes, mental health issues. People who say, of students who say they have poor mental health. Now, on the left-hand side, the category with the largest number is people who also consider themselves very liberal. And it goes down as you become more conservative. Now, this is one of the issues that I want to discuss with Dr. Hartz. Why are our liberal women so unhappy? Now, before I bring him on, I want to introduce him to you. He's a clinical psychologist and the founder and director of the Open Therapy Institute. He was formerly a professor in the clinical psychology doctoral program at Long Island University, where he also completed his PhD. He completed his clinical internship at Columbia University Medical Center, and he also completed training at Mount Sinai Hospital and the William Alanson White Institute. For several years, Dr. Hartz has written about political issues and mental health for outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, City Journal, Discourse, The Federalist, Real Clear Education, Quillet, Heterodox Academy, and the New York Post. His work has been featured in the New York Times, Dr. Phil Primetime, which is where I also saw him, the Dr. Drew podcast, the Free Press, and many outlets. So, to Heart and Mind, you're so busy. I'm surprised you can do this. I'm glad I have my show at night.
Thanks for having me.
What do you think about this article? It says that liberal women are less happy. Now, I am very wary because I don't want to be the same kind of bias I'm accusing the other side of being. Do you think this is accurate?
Well, I think that there are survey data where they ask people their political orientation, then they give them a depression questionnaire, and there's a correlation. And I have seen other studies along these lines, so the finding doesn't surprise me. But it could be caused by so many different things, and it's hard to say exactly what it is. That there are beliefs that are popular, that are on the left, that I think are probably harmful to mental health. But I don't know that we have enough data to say there's like a clear causal link there. Actually, I think there might be, I don't have this handy, but I do think there might be studies that actually have looked at specific beliefs and their relationship with mood, and they have suggested a causal link, but I don't think that was done in this study.
Well, it also, I would say, I think it's a many-fold issue. I think people who have mental health issues are drawn to many of the ideas and the tactics of the left. But I would also venture, because studying influence, being a social psychologist and looking at how people are influenced, I've done several shows, several episodes of Heart and Mind where I've talked about the power of fear and how people are more easily controlled through fear than any other cause. So the fact that, for instance, I shared with my audience, and you audience members, you remember this, when I showed you things, and we're going to show a few of them as well, where Whoopi Goldberg on The View, which is very popular among left-wing women, said that if Trump got back into office, he was going to reinstate slavery. And we have Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett saying things like that the Proud Boys are going to be at the election sites and they have guns that they can hold on people while they're voting to get them to vote a certain way. So they do a lot to whip up and trigger a lot of fear because it increases loyalty. But it is devastating to the people who follow them.
I also kind of read that as the emotions related to politics are getting so charged that they're not just getting emotionally dysregulated, but their grasp on reality, the reality testing is slipping. And I think people's sense of it's hard in the media landscape to figure out what's real and what's not. And that's only gotten harder, it seems. But I do think people are so scared and angry and distraught and distressed over these issues that they have trouble cognitively holding it together. And I think that's a really important effect that I do think I see happening.
Now, one of the things I sent some questions to you, and we're going to get to, but before we get to the questions about the Open Therapy Institute, because I really want you to share that with the audience. When therapists become activists, I mean, we wrote the whole book, Cynical Therapies, was about the fact that it's not just that your therapist is an activist, it's that they're being trained to be activists when they're training to be therapists. They're actually getting this in the training colleges, in the universities. They're being told that this is an integral part of offering assistance to people, is to get them to align with the left progressive narrative.
Yeah.
Are people getting the help they need is basically, and that leads to why you decided to create the Open Therapy Institute. Do you think people are getting the help they need?
I I saw over my training almost every year the politicization of the field got worse and worse. Um, Most of the time, it was rationalized this way. They'd say, well, if your patient is racist, are you just going to ignore that or are you going to actually address it? And then they'd say, well, disagreeing with these policies, whether it's immigration or policing or education or DEI or whatever, disagreeing with those is racist. So they kind of used that label of racism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia to kind of claim uh, most political issues, as there's a non-racist view on the issues and a racist view. So if they have the wrong view, they're racist. So then you talk to them, and so then you have to broach it, you have to address it, and there's a clear pathologized viewpoint that therefore now is it's the therapist's moral responsibility to raise that and address that. And you can obviously see how now therapists, when they start thinking that way, they're just policing the viewpoints of their patients in ways that are almost certainly counter-therapeutic and unethical.
Now, what do you think also about this affirmation only model for gender dysphoria and gender ideology?
Yeah.
Um, you even see it on shows like, watching Chicago Med, and a young kid comes in, and maybe 11 or 12, who claims he's a girl and he's a boy, and the good doctor. I mean, they have all of these shows where these people are supposedly super smart, and they just have an of course attitude about these things, and they've been doing it for decades. Again, we come from, this is why it's valuable to have different types of psychology, because you're coming at it as like they're pathologizing this, any mindset that doesn't fit the narrative. I'm looking at how are they influencing people to buy into this stuff, and I'm looking at all the forums that they're using to just slip it in as truth with a capital T, not belief with a small b.
There's it's really, really shocking how small and unsubstantial the evidence is for these claims. A lot of times there's no evidence at all. A lot of times the evidence is in the other direction. And what I noticed when this was rolled out, I don't know what it was like for you if you had like an abnormal psych class in your doctoral program.
Of course.
But so I don't think we had a unit on trans stuff. Maybe it was mentioned, but gender dysphoria was barely touched on, and people knew almost nothing about it. They didn't see patients with it very often. If they did, they might refer out because it was so rare. Then all of a sudden in 2017, it's in the news, and I'm watching on the news that there's this robust mental health consensus for a whole treatment platform and a whole set of policies that I never heard discussed at all. And I actually didn't know anybody in the field who heard them discussed either. And the colleagues that I knew, that I talked to them, they might privately express reservations, but they were afraid to even ask, where's the evidence for these claims? You're saying that there's this particular model of treatment, affirmation, affirmative care, and you're saying that that leads to better outcome. Where's your data? People were afraid to ask that, because if they did their due diligence and asked a basic question that honestly mental health professionals should be asking about any proposed treatment, they thought, I'm going to be labeled a transphobe and I'm going to get blacklisted and people aren't going to refer to me and it's going to ruin my career. And so, the same censorship culture that affects other parts of society is also present in the mental health field. And I knew a lot of people who had concerns. I knew few people who actually felt comfortable saying them openly.
Well, it didn't start there. It started with the promotion of homosexuality in the early 20th century. Same sort of thing. You had to just unquestioningly look at what was going on and say, oh, this is great. That was the only option. No questions asked, no looking to see if there was. One of my issues, of course, me working with sexual assault, I'm looking at residual trauma
Hmm.
because I'm working in the community. I'm noticing more than 90% of the people I'm dealing with were molested before they were legal age to have sex. And I'm like, you mean to tell me this doesn't have any impact on what's going on? Because the way the brain
Hmm.
works, it will normalize anything in
Hmm.
order to keep you functioning. It's why abuse victims, my other area, can live in an abusive relationship and not fall apart. The brain will adapt the way it feels it needs to. It needs to be studied. I personally think everything needs to be studied. I just,
Yeah,
and the
that's the
question,
sad thing. And I do know there are researchers who will ask controversial questions about everything, and I think that's good. You need that for people to trust the scientific findings. You need them to be challenged. I think it's really unhealthy when one side doesn't get to make its case because then the other side loses its credibility. It's not really challenged. And I think that there's been a trend, I'd say it's an anti science trend of limiting the viewpoints that can be expressed.
people think it started with gender ideology. I just want to give people a
Oh,
heads up. It started before that. It's the
yeah.
same methods that are used, calling people phobic if they ask questions
Uh,
or know any trends or problems or issues. It's just, I get really wary. My hackles rise. It's why I didn't buy the COVID narrative. My
right.
hackles rise when the same tactics that I learned about as a social psychologist on how to manipulate people, when I see them being used by the government and the media to get us to buy into the COVID narrative, I recognized it. I've seen other things that people take, the average person takes as being right and true and verified and has scientific basis. And so much of what we think about social norms, the studies on it have been so limited because beginning in the early 20th century, certain issues were no longer funded. You can't study something if you don't have the funding.
Right, right.
So what we want to do is start funding. If something is valid and true and right, it will be backed up by the data. You won't be afraid to look at it.
Right.
But what we've done is made people afraid to look. And tell us about the Open Therapy Institute, because as I said, when I found out about this, and I found out about it more than a year ago, and I was absolutely
Oh,
thrilled because I see it as much needed. So tell us about it.
oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So, when I started, I think when I was in my training and I felt like there was a lot of really counter therapeutic, I think very often very aggressive and distorted ideas that were kind of unquestionable that were taking over the training. And it wasn't that they came up every once in a while. It was every week. It was multiple times a week. Even asking challenging questions about these ideologies was unacceptable. It was mostly DEI type stuff. And I was looking around, there were no institutions that seemed to be responding to this anywhere in the mental health field. And I wrote an op ed basically saying, we need to do something. We need new trainings. Patients need to be able to find therapists who aren't aligned with this stuff. We need professional organizations. We need textbooks. We need everything in the field around this. Um, but as bad as my experience was in grad school, after I stopped and thought for a little bit, I thought, you know what? People are having experiences like this, like as you said in your intro, they're having experiences like this in every profession. And I knew people who were in the arts or the performing arts, or they were a writer for a TV show or something, or they were in finance. They were at a bank, or they were at a law firm, or they were at a hospital. They were a doctor or a nurse, and they were experiencing some of the same things that I experienced in grad school. These kinds of aggressive, coercive trainings, censorship culture. They were feeling isolated. They would think about quitting their job or changing their career because they couldn't take it anymore. And I thought, where do those people go? And so then I was started to think, there's lots of populations like that. There's lots of people who are suffering, whether it's from self-censorship or it's they're attacked for their views, they're canceled, They might be, maybe they're conservative, maybe they have religious beliefs. There's also masculinity issues. There's people who have any like families where somebody's has gender dysphoria. The parents reach out all the time. They don't know what to do. Where can we find a therapist who won't just automatically affirm and medicalize this? So I was thinking there's dozens and dozens of populations that need care, and there's professionals who are isolated who want a community. This is the perfect way to kind of wed those. And we can start to do the research that's needed to be done in the field and build a professional community that can start to document these issues and train therapists on them so that we can provide better care to what I think is millions and millions of patients across the country.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And Melinda Richards, who, as I said, is in Australia, and she's a friend of mine, and she's former talk show host, a successful author, influencer. She wrote a question and she asked, Andrew, this is for you, Andrew, have some therapists who support the woke narrative become a deeper part of the problem? And has this really hurt the industry?
I think that there's a lack of dialogue at most institutions in the profession around these issues. So it's kind of like what I was saying with care in the treatment context, where if you're racist, obviously that has to be confronted, and you're racist if you disagree with basically anything on the Democrat Party platform. So it's a very similar kind of thing with the institutions in terms of how they treat professionals. If you disagree with any of their claims, that means you're racist or sexist or transphobic or whatever, and therefore unacceptable. And so with that type of argument, they've basically managed to capture almost every institution in the mental health profession in the US for sure, probably in most countries. And it's led to a situation where the training is increasingly ideological. People can't get through training unless they agree because it's too difficult. And then the therapists who are providing services are increasingly ideological, and they're leaving lots of patients underserved.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you, what are the most common issues? Because of what you do, because of the Open Therapy Institute, because of Heterodox Academy,
Yes.
You would actually have people feel free to open up to you, other therapists, open up to you about issues that they're having.
Yes.
What are some of the most common issues that they mention to you? And what about the clients?
Well,
Because I have an idea, but I could be wrong,
Oh, you have a guess of who the people are that are most
Well,
likely to...
my guess would be that people would feel like they have to in their when they're treating someone, that they have to reinforce the narrative even if they don't believe it themselves.
Oh, that therapy. Yeah.
And that clients would feel like, if I'm not left wing, how am I going to find a therapist who's not going to put me down for voting a certain way or owning a gun or, looking at issues of immigration, for instance, and saying, we need to bring people in from compatible cultures. I say that, and I'm Black, so it's like, but then again, this is why I have this show, because I mentioned to people, I have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts because people look at my work and look at what I know. They think it's valuable. And they're like, great, yay, let's hire you. And then they find out that I am an evidence-based person. I think people have a right not to like other groups. We can explore why you don't. That can be helpful. But you don't have to like everybody. And also the evidence will demonstrate all cultures are not compatible. That's fact. So how can you get mad at somebody for thinking that? And they just, if I'm not part of the team, I just get rejected.
I want to answer this question about the clients and the therapists that reach out to us, but I think what you're hitting on is really important, because there is this kind of feedback loop. There's a feedback loop where therapists are afraid to say what their concerns are, for example, about affirmative care.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because they think they'll get blacklisted. Meanwhile, patients are looking for therapists who don't do affirmative care, and they can't find them. And so it's actually the other way around. If the therapist came out about their concerns in an evidence-based, thoughtful way, their practice could grow if they could have a way of connecting to the patients who actually want to see them, rather than the therapists are hiding and then the patients are underserved. So it's a weird thing that the therapists are so often, they're afraid that if they come out, if they speak out about any other concerns in their field, it's going to obliterate their practice. When I think it's really the opposite. They're about 90% of therapists are left-leaning. It's really about 40% of patients are conservative. There's not enough therapists for the patients who want a centrist, conservative, or heterodox therapist, or a therapist who can work with them and understand them. There aren't enough therapists, and they struggle to find someone. Yet the therapists, their number one concern is, if I speak out on these issues, I'm going to get blacklisted. It's going to ruin my practice. So I think one of the things that we're hoping to do with the Open Therapy Institute is, by having a network of professionals, patients who want that type of therapist can find us, and therapists who want to do that work can do it, so that the therapist gets to speak up and the patient gets a better therapist. In terms of why do most therapists reach out to us, I think it's mostly because they're feeling isolated, and it's self-censorship, and we get a lot of grad students who are struggling to get through training. It has to do more, I think, with their issues trying to get through the field, as it's becoming increasingly hostile to people with dissenting views. The clients that reach out to us, I think that's an important question. If I could just take a second to talk about that before we jump into it. It's the clients right now, we get people primarily, it's related to trans issues. Gender dysphoria is a big one, and anti-Semitism is a big one.
Wow.
We don't. A lot of people concerned about anti-Semitism after October 7th, and they want a therapist who they feel like is going to be understanding. What I don't think patients are quite getting yet, though, is that it's shocking to me. For example, a lot of patients go into therapy thinking they're not supposed to talk about religion, and the therapist never asks about religion. And they think they're not supposed to talk about it, so they don't talk about it. And so this whole part of their life just gets systematically ignored. And it could be a really important part of their life. Maybe they'll gloss over it briefly, but they don't really talk about it. Could be a lot of thoughts and feelings happening there. Could be really relevant to what their struggles are or how they might address their struggles, and it's getting totally ignored. And it's the same thing with politics. Therapists often don't ask about it. Patients often think they're not supposed to talk about it, and they have huge feelings about it. It can have a big impact on their life, and they think they're not supposed to talk about it. And it's really like, if you go back all the way to like Freud and free association, he said, if there's something that you think you're not supposed to talk about, especially talk about that. That's the thing to talk about. It's something that's emotionally charged that you have trouble talking about, or you think you're not supposed to talk about, or it's going to be difficult to talk about. That's where the treatment often has its biggest effect and its biggest impact. And I think this stuff is just being ignored, and it's being ignored by therapists, and it's being ignored by patients. And a lot of patients think, oh, I don't want to think about politics when I go to my therapist, so I'm just going to not talk about it and not think about it. But if it's impacting your life, if you have lots of strong feelings about it, it's the type of thing that I think often people do need to talk about. And it's and so I think, and it's the same about everything else: race, gender, sexuality, masculinity issues, whatever it is, all the social taboos that people have a hard time talking about. We're in a moment where therapists are often avoiding those issues because they're emotionally charged. It's too emotionally charged to talk about here. We can't have that conversation. So the therapists ignore it, and the patient is more than happy to collude and not talk about it too, because they don't want to see what's going to happen if they talk about it. So it's odd because we can see society kind of seeming to get crazier. People seem to be getting more emotionally dysregulated. Mental health seems to be getting worse. And what might be causing it? Well, could it be the stuff that we feel really strongly about, but none of us seem to have the maturity to be able to talk about? I think that's totally relevant, but therapists are not going there. So I want potential clients, potential patients to say, to get that if you have strong feelings about it, it could be related to your symptoms or whatever you're coming into treatment for, and it's probably relevant to talk about, and find a therapist who you can talk about it with. That's really important.
Now, is it important if you have a strong feelings about a political situation, is it important to find a therapist who agrees with you, or a therapist who is non-judgmental of your feelings about it? Because I worry that if you go to a therapist and you have the same blind spots as your therapist,
Right.
there are going to be things that could be affecting both of you that you're just going to miss. They won't be able to help you because they're too immersed in activism. This
Right.
again, it's like they're activists, and especially since over the last, I'd say 20 years, because I'm old enough to remember, over the last 20 years, people who are on the left are being increasingly discouraged from ever encountering and dealing with any opinions, views, news, information that does not fully support their existing worldview. So, two
Yeah.
things are happening. They're becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Their cognitive dissonance is increasing whenever they encounter somebody who doesn't agree with them because they're just not used to it anymore. And also, they're being manipulated by their information source who can tell them anything without any evidence whatsoever. And because they've trained these people not to look elsewhere, the person doesn't recognize that they're being given faulty data to back up what they're being told.
Yeah.
I just worry. First of all, I wanted to mention before we go on two things. Number one, please read this article. I found it so fascinating. This is Dr. Hartz's article, "The Doctor Won't See You Now." It's a fantastic title. It was in the Wall Street Journal, and you can go online and find it. It's really, really good. And also, Melinda Richards also has another comment, Pierre, saying that perhaps the anti-science trend of name calling, shaming, impacts the mental health industry as much as all other industries, public service, healthcare, etc., that have been captured by wokeism, and this has impacted overall performance.
You let me, yeah, I'll respond to it. People can find that article and other articles on the media page of our website. So if you go to opentherapyinstitute.org, click media, you'll see Sally Satel's article, you'll see my article. We have a lot of other offerings there. So check that
Well,
out
I
if you're
have a
interested.
slide that actually has some of your contacts things.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Okay, there's a couple of things I wanted to respond to. The first thing that you were talking about was like therapist patient matching based on ideology. First of all, I think that that's actually impossible to do in practice because there's no way every therapist can agree with all their patients on every issue. Not going to happen. So it's just not even feasible. And so on some level, I think every therapist and patient are going to have to understand that there's an inevitability that you're going to disagree on some issue. And that's okay. There are different people at the Open Therapy Institute who have different perspectives on this in terms of how much matching between ideology, between patient and therapist there needs to be. I think the argument for some matching is they're likely to better understand each other's values and then have a stronger relationship and a stronger outcome. The other argument is what we want to do instead, actually, which is really what OTI does, is we want to train therapists to be able to work as well as they can with the widest swath of patients possible. That if most therapists don't get any training on socio-political values, on viewpoint issues, on other, so they're very likely to make all kinds of errors working with people with different views. So I think we could do better without necessarily having to match people. The thing that you said about patients, I think in particular on the left, not encountering ideas on the right is really, really important. I think that's it's an education issue in large part. There's a media component as well, but there's a lot of it has to do with education. People have to be taught a range of views, and when they're not just, it's not just that they're missing information, it's that they can become really emotionally dysregulated because they see every issue in these all or nothing terms because they've never seen the other side. So whenever they encounter a different view, they lose it. They lose their, they can't tolerate it because they haven't ever had to do that throughout their education. So I think, I do think that's a legitimate issue. I hope we can get research that shows that and reforms that help address that issue.
Oh, gosh, I wish I had you for a few hours. You're going to have to come back. But anyway,
Okay.
well, a couple of things that I wanted to make sure we had a chance to talk about. And one of the things is that a lot of the people, especially emotionally vulnerable people, will follow whatever they think is popular. And here's where the woke were absolutely deviously, cunningly brilliant, in that by taking over the media and the universities, they made it seem as though woke ideology and the woke narrative was almost universally accepted. When the Department of Government Efficiency went in and started digging out where our taxpayer dollars were going and found that they were spending billions to pay people to promote woke ideology. They were paying universities, they were funding studies, they were paying celebrities, they were paying, newscasters, they were writing it into scripts. So one of the things I think that has been a real shakeup is the Trump win of the 2024 election, because even I actually showed my audience, my Heart and Mind audience, how many of the polls that they had prior to the election showed Kamala Harris clearly winning the election.
Right.
And I think that's the reason why some of her followers are so outraged. Because they think Trump cheated to win. And what it was is they were fed false information about the Democrats' popularity, and it has plummeted since then. Let's get back to trying virus. No, I'm sorry, I just don't understand. There's a comment I'm not quite sure I understand. Okay. But I just thought, now that it's not going to be funded as much, this could have an impact on how many people are just going to blindly follow woke ideology, because it won't be as popular because people won't be paid to promote it anymore. And the election has allowed the other perspective to actually gain a platform that they worked really hard to keep it from having any platform at all. I mentioned that even when I got my doctorate, I had to replace one of my dissertation advisors because I had a non-woke topic as my dissertation idea. I wanted to look at the non-financial cost of being on welfare. And I found that it had a significant impact on hopelessness. It increased hopelessness. It increased conflict with other people. It just caused a lot of issues. And I compared equally impoverished population. One was getting government money. The other side had low-paying jobs. The low-paying job people were doing is psychologically and emotionally doing much better, even though they were working hard and underpaid. So this is something that I know, God, we're running out of time, but you have to mention this because
it's
so key.
This is what we were talking about back to the issue with education, where if people are only taught one side, it's not just that they then have a distorted perspective. It's that they get emotionally dysregulated because they can't tolerate that things have pros and cons, that issues are complicated. And so whenever they encounter nuance, they get emotionally dysregulated and they can really start distorting cognitively in extreme ways. It makes them fragile. And that's why it's so important that I think children really from adolescence up really have to be taught dialectical thinking. Every class needs to say you need to have the ability to talk about pros and cons. Those are more sophisticated, stronger arguments. Arguments that just say one side's all good, and for whatever it is, you're talking about taxes, you're talking about foreign policy, it doesn't matter. Any issue, you have to say, okay, well, this is this program does X and this does Y. You have to just be able to tolerate, and you're going to be more effective if you can do that. I think that the challenge, this is really central to the challenge that Open Therapy Institute's facing, because when you have a situation like in the mental health field where one side so dominates the discourse, you have to give voice to the side that's missing. And if you don't do that, you're never going to get to anything dialectical. This is true in other fields too. So it's very tricky to kind of say, when you're dealing with organizations that are framing things in an all or nothing way, as a lot of American civil society institutions are, especially universities, especially mental health, but also arts, media, all kinds of, they're all used to this all or nothing mindset. So the only way to get to dialectical thinking, I think the first step has to be, what's on the side of the dialectic that we're missing? What's on the other side? And you have to give some room for that to be expressed before you can get to any type of integration of what the two mean together. But that's a very dangerous moment, especially when you're thinking about society, because then you're saying, you're giving the other side, and it's easy to kind of lock horns and, oh, we're just one side against the other, and things can escalate. So it's a very difficult dance, and it's the same type of dance. This dialectical thinking is used most often in treatment of personality disorders, especially borderline personality disorder. And with those patients, they need dialectical thinking the most. It's really effective, really powerful treatment for them. And they can be incredibly hard to get to it. There's a whole, because you get pulled into power struggles and fights and all of this stuff. So it's very delicate and I think very challenging to kind of say, what's the field been missing and how can we express that in a way that's going to be really constructive, not just taking the other side and just fighting about it, but how do we get the other side expressed in a way that's effective?
Well, I have also noticed that this all or nothing mindset shows up in another way. I have anything that is done by the side that is considered other, capital O,
right,
is always bad. Anything done by our side is either good, capital G, or excusable. And so even trying to get people, especially on the left, as I said, because they're just not used to ever having anybody push back and say, and in fact, I've seen a few influencers who go around interviewing people and citing things that are done by the left's politicians or system, and saying, oh, the right did this.
right.
What do you think about that? And the person comes down and condemns and whatever, and they say, oops, I meant your side.
Yes.
And then the person stands there and they don't know how to handle it because they've been conditioned not to look at the wrong of their own side, and everything done by the other side is just automatically condemned. I worry about a society, and I mean all of Western society. We have 80% of the people in Western society with no judgment right now.
Yeah.
Because dialectical thinking, as you know, it requires being able to handle cognitive dissonance. You have to handle something making you uncomfortable because it goes against your beliefs. And I think the solution should be when you get to the end, you're like, okay, this side aligns more with my values. This side
Right,
does not. It's not whether one is right and one is
right,
wrong.
right.
One side aligns with my values, one side doesn't. But you're also planting those seeds, and that's where the sneaky social psychologist comes in. You're planting seeds that are going to haunt them at night, where they're going to come across something and say, well, wait a minute, we talked about this. Is that really correct? And they're going to go back to their side and start asking questions and get evicted. They're going to be shunned. You're not allowed
Yeah, you're
to ask
not.
questions.
I think I would say one thing people to know when I was saying about this is used most often in borderline personality disorder. Those are cluster B personality disorders are really driven by the inability to think dialectically. And
Yes.
so when you see a society where people can't talk about pros and cons, you're gonna get more cluster B type behavior. And one of the things that's really fascinating about always agreeing with your side is that the two sides can flip and flip back multiple times, and people just flip right with them.
Like the
And
vaccine.
it's like the vaccine. That's true. Right. It was Kamala Harris
When
was very
Trump came
skeptical
out
of
with
the
it,
vaccine.
they said, I'm
It was
never
the
going,
Trump
we have so
vaccine.
many people, I'm never going to take that vaccine.
Yes,
Trump,
exactly.
the axis of evil. And then as soon as Biden said, we're going to mandate this, oh, he's just trying to protect people. Same
Yes.
vaccine, same toxic vaccine. Now, let's show you when people
Can
say,
I?
but it's wrong on both sides. Whenever Trump, during the rallies, whenever Trump would bring up the vaccine, because he's still not clear on how bad they are. He may be now, but well, it's been recent if he is. And he would bring up about getting vaccinated and he'd get booed. Now, I have never seen a Democrat leader get booed by their own people. But
Oh, that's
people
interesting.
that
Yeah.
follow Trump, it's like, I'll follow you as long as you're going in the direction I think you should go. Otherwise, you're on your own, buddy.
Um,
That's why I am so happy to have that audience here, because these are people who've already tried to unplug from the matrix, and I want to give them more tools to make it faster and more complete.
yes.
Now, diversity of perspective, we only have a few minutes left, so talk
Okay.
to me about that. You were really good talking about this with Dr. Phil. So,
I'm trying to remember what I said. I don't remember
well,
at
you were
all what I
talking
said.
about that there's no that everybody mentions diversity and how diversity is a good thing, but diversity of perspective is completely ignored.
Okay.
Diversity is okay if you
Definitely.
look different and you
Yes.
have different sexual behaviors, but if you are traditional, if you are Christian, if you are white, if you are
Right,
heterosexual,
right.
you are any of that, and that's automatically bad. So it's
Well,
only superficial.
it was so, and I think maybe what I was saying, if I'm trying to remember, in my training, there was such an emphasis on culturally competent training, which was the ability to work with different types of people. At least that's the way that they defined it. But they didn't say anything about socio-political values. There wasn't anything about religious faith. There wasn't anything on men's issues. And when you add that up, it's the large majority of patients who experience one of those, and that they're very salient to people's identities. So it was really, really shocking, and I think it's true in the literature, not just in the training, that these issues are largely ignored.
Oh man. Well, I have to say again, I'm going to have you back because this is such a big issue. Because, when people are going through life stressors, divorce, challenges with family, I've mentioned on the show before that I have several sisters to whom I'm persona non grata because
Mhm.
I'm a Trump supporter. So they don't speak to me. And believe me, that's very hurtful. I'm not going to lie and say I'm okay with it. No, I'm not. It breaks my heart. Um, but if I went to a therapist, would they understand? So we have to make a world where all of us, it's no good if the dialectical thinking is only happening on one side. And right now, the
Yeah.
dialectical thinking is only being encouraged among people on the right. It's completely discouraged by the people on the left, and we are getting more and more divided.
I think, these are, I mean, I'm sorry about your sisters. It's not a rare thing to hear. And I
Yeah.
really wonder where the people who have those experiences go, because the field is so left leaning that you'd probably assume that you can't find a therapist who would understand you. And I think a lot of those people don't seek treatment, even when they have severe issues like substance abuse problems or severe symptoms related to these concerns. And it's a huge failure of the field to not help those people.
Well, I would suggest everybody get a copy of the Open Therapy Institute journal. Here is the website. You can screenshot this and find it. I also hope that you will contact me on my website, or you can go on X, ask me a question. I will be uploading this episode because I need Dr. Hartz to come back. Okay.
Thank you. Can I make a couple plugs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I have a podcast with Leslie Elliott Boyce on her channel, The Radical Center. It's the Open Therapy Podcast. We have about one episode a week. Check it out. We're also on Substack. You can find all our social media outlets and our podcast on YouTube, our Substack, everything, our journal on our website, opentherapyinstitute.org. And if you're a mental health professional, please join and become a member. We have consultation groups every week. We have workshops. If you're looking for a therapist, email us and we'll try to find you some.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you, audience. And please hit us up with questions and we will see what we can do. Thank you. See you next week. Remember, Tuesdays are no longer boring. You're with us. Talk to you then.